Yes.
All right. Hi, I'm Tracy Hernandez, and I'm the founding CEO of BizFed, which is the Los Angeles County Business Federation, the Central Valley Business Federation. It's a massive network of all the existing business associations in our regions. We've got a little over 400,000 companies employing 3.5 million people working on the most important public policy issues before us. Today we have some amazing partners that are a part of BizFed every single day on a lot of important issues. Right now we're at SCAG's headquarters. What's SCAG? SCAG is the Southern California Association of Governments, master planning agency for 191 cities in Southern California. We have the LAEDC, Los Angeles Economic Development Corporation, Optimum Seismic, premier seismic retrofitting company in all of California, actually the West Coast. We have several other amazing BizFed members from the Long Beach Area Chamber. We have Christine Ross. From the Culver City Chamber, we have Kevin Lachoff. From the California Manufacturers and Technology Association, flew down from Sacramento just to be with us today, Gino DiCario. And from the Office of Emergency Management at LA County, we have Gene O'Donnell and Battalion Chief Frank Foreman from LA County Fire Department. And also we have from the, help me out. From the Small Business Associate. You're like the premier guest today, and here I am. Your name's not written in my blank. Hector?
Yes, Hector Barreto.
Barreto. He is amazing, and he's going to blow your mind when he comes up to the microphone, and that's why I did that stalling technique to give some extra presence on him. Sustainability is something we hear a lot about, but resilience is where it's all at. For us in LA, that means seismic resiliency, because if your building is not standing, it really doesn't matter if it's green or not. Let's hear a story from Evan Reese, who's the executive director and co-founder of the U.S. Resiliency Council, about two possible versions of Los Angeles. Evan?
Thank you, Tracy. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Evan Reese, and I am a structural engineer in California, and I am the executive director of the U.S. Resiliency Council. So I'm going to show you a tale of two buildings today, 2 businesses and 100 employees, all part of one community. But we're going to start with something fun. We're going to show you a video of a real live shake table test that occurred in Tokyo, Japan. Now, in this test, one building's been retrofitted, but one building has not. All right, well, that was pretty dramatic. I assume you can figure out which one was retrofitted and what wasn't. But let's imagine that this didn't happen in a test in Tokyo. Let's imagine this happened in Southern California one evening. And let's imagine that these buildings are not homes, but were commercial properties. So the building on the left, the retrofitted building, belongs to a man named Tony Lopez. And 5 years ago, Tony invested about 2% of the value of the building in seismically retrofitting it. And the biotech company that occupies most of the building, we'll call it Cancer Cure, has more than $10 million worth of equipment needed to do their research. Fortunately, because Tony retrofitted that building, there was minimal damage in the earthquake that hit downtown Los Angeles, and within 3 days, all of their employees were back to work. Cancer Cure informed its investors that it's still in business, the cash kept flowing, and they were able to pay their lease and keep their employees on the job. Well, what was the return on Tony Lopez's investment? Well, Tony preserved his most valuable asset and continued to receive lease revenue without interruption. Cancer Cure was cash flow positive with only minimal losses that their insurance covered. Their employees kept a steady income and full employment. And the community benefited from both the businesses and the employees continuing to work, earn, and spend, keeping the community economically sound. But the building on the right belonged to a guy named Joe Smith. And although he owns several buildings in Los Angeles and he has decent cash flow, retrofitting the buildings was never really part of his long list of things that he needed to do to keep those buildings maintained. Well, after the earthquake, his tenant, Toy Makers Incorporated, is wiped out. All of their equipment and inventory is destroyed, and since this was their only location, they had no backup. Toy Makers has liability insurance, but that doesn't cover earthquakes. And like 90% of owners in California, Joe Smith did not have earthquake insurance on his building. Toy Makers had a big delivery scheduled for an upcoming festival in Nebraska, so 4 of their employees were working late that night to finish the job. Unfortunately, they did not survive the building's collapse. A week after the quake, the families of these employees sued Toy Makers and Joe Smith for wrongful death. Toy Makers' unique product was to be a key feature of a festival in Nebraska, so the organizers had to scramble, reprogram, and source the material elsewhere. And 2 weeks after the festival, they sued Toy Makers for breach of contract. Toy Makers was not only wiped out physically, but also wiped out financially. Their 35 employees are without paychecks or jobs. Most were low-wage workers living in the limited amount of LA's affordable housing. Most of those buildings weren't retrofitted either, so now some are jobless and homeless. So what were the consequences of Joe Smith's lack of investment? Well, he suffered a total loss of his investment and lease revenue and is facing millions of dollars in personal liability claims. Toy Makers goes bankrupt. They're also facing personal liability claims. The employees have lost their jobs and several their lives. The community struggles to feed and house the employees and clean up the destroyed building while suffering the loss of tax base from the devastated businesses. But it doesn't have to be this way. The U.S. Resiliency Council is a nonprofit organization with the mission of improving community resilience one building at a time. We have an earthquake performance rating system. Think about the crash rating you find on every car you buy, so that you can learn about the resilience of the buildings where you live and where you work. We are looking to help owners, insurers, lenders, and communities develop incentives to encourage retrofit and resilience-based design. Right now in Los Angeles County, the scenario on the right, the unretrofitted scenario, is all too likely for many of our buildings. This partnership behind me aims to change that, and the U.S. Resiliency Council is proud to be supporting it. Seismic resilience has been my life's work, and so it's exciting to see the commitment of this partnership to making Southern California stronger now and in the future. So let's hear from each of our partners with their perspective. Stephen?
Thank you, Evan, and thank you, Tracy, for the invitation. The Los Angeles County Economic Development Corporation represents over 10.2 million people in the Los Angeles region, over 88 different cities, and over 100 unincorporated regions in this great region we call Los Angeles. Now, we've been talking about how individuals and families need to get ready for the big one. We all know from the U.S. Geological Survey that it's long past due, the next big earthquake that might be hitting this region. And we've seen from previous experience the impact it has on the local region. The Northwich earthquake, the recent fires that's devastated our communities. And yet at the same time, I don't think this region has done enough to prepare for our businesses to recover and be ready for either a natural disaster like a fire or an earthquake. And therefore, this partnership is so important to raise awareness in terms of what needs to happen, what can be done here to prepare for the future. Now, the actions are quite simple, actually. With technological advancement that's been happening around the world, we can see from other examples, whether, as Evan was mentioning, from Tokyo, examples from Tokyo, or just from our own backyard, whether it's cloud service preparation, whether it's talking to your community and also to your employees about getting ready. These are simple steps that can be done. In fact, the Los Angeles County Economic Development Corporation has prepared a guide specifically listing the action steps that each business can do in order for them to be prepared for the upcoming disaster and the recovery that needs to happen. These individual steps are important because it's not only affecting what's happening here in Los Angeles, but also around the nation. A lot of people don't realize, but Los Angeles is one of the major trading hubs around the United States, with the #1 container port, the Port of Los Angeles, the #2 container port, the Port of Long Beach, and LAX, one of the busiest airports in the world, located right here in this region. Whatever happens here in Los Angeles will impact not only Los Angeles, but the rest of the United States, and in many different cases around the world as well. So the businesses here, the more prepared they are, the better we are to be able to equip to be able to address some of the major issues that we're going to be facing as the region, as a community. So I thank SCAG and BizFed and also Optimum Seismic for partnering with us on this really important event to really raise the awareness and making sure that our community and our businesses are ready to recover when the big events happen. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Stephen. Business is the bedrock of our communities. Everywhere you look, about everything you do, everything you buy, underlying it is a business. If our businesses fall, our community falls. If our community falls, our businesses fall. In fact, we each are at risk if we're not prepared. BizFed represents all kinds of businesses and business associations, and we have a vantage point where we can see how everything is truly connected. Our company's ability to sell toys, to sell aerospace satellites, to sell cars, to sell good pasta, is tied to also our employees. And we need to, of course, in a natural disaster, any disaster, be able to share and rely on our staff and take care of our staff and their families. Even if one of those links in the chain is broken after an earthquake, they all feel the pain. Investing in seismic resiliency, retrofitting, obtaining earthquake insurance, geographically diversifying one's assets, developing post-earthquake response, and recovery programs serves the economic interests of every single business and, by default, every single one of us. The partnership aims to make seismic resiliency a part of every company's business plan to prove that retrofitting is an economic benefit to every business and to the whole community. We want to make sure that seismic resiliency is as basic as having the right equipment or the right location, the right talent for the job, the right marketing firm, the right internet server, and so on. We already have a plan. We've already produced 2 of these series. This is the 3rd, and we have 2 more coming. We purposely moved all around LA County by design so that business owners, we could meet them where they're at. We're tied in with LA County, and all 5 county supervisors are also supporting this work and effort. So we're truly on the ground. This is a grassroots effort. Of course, you heard from Evan Reese from the U.S. Resiliency Council, and we're happy that he's going to begin hosting a webinar series every single month to help businesses on an ongoing basis. And thanks to Optimum Seismic, we're fully funded for the next year because we'll do this series of programs again next year. Our work is never over. This is a relentless piece of work. We're all in it together. An earthquake's going to happen, but it doesn't have to be a disaster. And thankfully, business is going to be a part of that being a better outcome. Now I'd like to ask Komi Ajis, the Executive Director of SCAG, to make a few remarks. Komi.
Good afternoon. Thanks, Tracy. My name is Komi Ajis. I'm the Executive Director here at Southern California Association of Governments. And really glad to be hosting this important conversation that we've had today, and one that we have been focused on over a number of years. Now, in the past 2 years, we've seen numerous natural disasters in our region here in Southern California. Now, SCAG covers 6 counties, and so it extends beyond just Los Angeles. We have 6 counties in Southern California, except for San Diego. And we've seen a number of natural disasters in the last couple of years, if not more, in Southern California. And the economy of this region has been impacted as a result of these events. But one threatening us today is the fact that this region sits on the San Andreas Fault, and we expect that there will be a major event into the future. And since we are charged with regional planning, long-range planning at SCAG, our job is to assume that there will be a big event and plan for that. And so resiliency is a very important element. There's a very real possibility that this earthquake will occur, and could permanently cripple some of our regional infrastructure and as a result impact our regional economy. Whether it's gas pipelines or roadways or rail lines, all of this are susceptible to the potential event. In a month or so after a disaster, if there's still no infrastructure, we can just imagine the impact it would have, not just on businesses, but on just general livability and households across the region. Resilience is key to maintaining our edge as a region. We think we are the most vibrant economic region in the region. We are the 14th or 15th largest, depending on who you talk to, largest economy in the world if we were a country. We can predict that when the big one happens, and we cannot predict when the big one happens, and we actually we can't predict how bad it could be. But what we can do is take steps to minimize that potential damage, such that damage does not become a disaster, as Tracy mentioned. We want to be able to speed up recovery. This has been a long-term planning element of SCAG's priority in terms of SCAG's major priorities. Back in 2016, we launched an earthquake preparedness initiative in partnership with Dr. Lucy Jones and the Center for Science and Society. This was to help each one of our 191 cities and the 6 counties to actually prepare and address some of their unresolved earthquake risks. The video you saw I think, is case in point of what we need to do. And so it's gratifying that after 2 years, we've seen a number of our cities begin to take that seriously and deal with upgrading their building codes. Through education, outreach, and technical assistance, we've helped cities develop and implement seismic resiliency action plans tailored to their specific priorities and the risks that they face, and such that we're strengthening the infrastructure and reviewing building safety codes across our region. Underlying everything, the core of an effective resiliency program is really collaboration, and that's the essence of our conversation today. Is the various elements that are around this partnership to collaborate to bring to the forefront of our conversation this very silent element of policymaking, which is resiliency. Underlying this is really the collaboration that underlies this is the essence of the work that we're trying to do as a regional entity. Our region needs resilience strategies that look beyond political and jurisdictional boundaries. Just as disasters and floods and fires and earthquakes do not recognize boundaries, we have to imagine that the solutions and our collaboration have to be beyond boundaries. We know for a fact that more earthquakes will come to Southern California, but the disaster that follows does not have to. So with that, thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Ali Sahabi. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of Optimum Seismic. I have been a general engineering contractor practicing sustainability since 1988. In Southern California, our number one sustainability issue is seismic resiliency. You can't be sustainable if you're not earthquake resilient. I like to use an analog of a building. If you can imagine a building being sustainability and resiliency, its foundation. Any building without a foundation eventually will fall. This is the connection between resiliency and sustainability. We can't separate them. Unfortunately, there is a myth that the economics of retrofitting are not practical. That myth is wrong. I'm here to share with you some examples of why it is wrong. First, researchers at Caltech found that for every dollar spent on retrofitting of soft story structure, property owners could expect to save up to $7. That's a very good return on investment, ladies and gentlemen. Now, I want to share with you specific examples. On one spectrum, for a small building, a 10-unit apartment building owned by a mom and pop owner. The average value of that building in Southern California is about $2.5 million. The cost of retrofitting, $75,000. That's just 3% of the value of the building to save what is likely their life's investment. On the other end of the spectrum is Anheuser-Busch, the so-called king of beers. Their Los Angeles brewery, located in San Fernando Valley, has been through two major earthquakes, Sylmar in early 70s and Northridge in 1994. This is an amazing story. This is something that every business needs to really pay attention to. After the Sylmar earthquake, they invested $1.2 million to do seismic retrofitting of their existing buildings and the new buildings that they were building, making sure that they are seismically safe. After Northridge earthquake, Anheuser-Busch estimated that their retrofit saved them more than $1 billion, 90 times of the cost of the retrofit, $750 million of that in potential economic losses, and $350 million was in potential building damages. They were standing after the earthquake. In fact, they were one of the companies that was providing water. Some of you that were here back in Northridge, there were lines, miles of people standing to receive clean water. And they were one of the companies that came out and helped the community at that time. The numbers are bigger in this case for Anheuser-Busch, but the result is the same. The building and the businesses are saved by proper resiliency planning. We want the businesses of every size to wake up to the fact that retrofitting and other seismic resiliency efforts have an economic benefit. They're not a detriment. To the businesses that own their own building, it's another myth. Don't think that this does not matter to you. It does. In addition to having your own response and recovery plans, all business owners should know if the building they lease is retrofitted or not. Otherwise, you risk losing it all. I would like to, at this time, invite Evan Rees here. Evan and I co-authored a white paper which you have in your press kit. This is the first of two white papers. I'm truly honored to working with Evan. Evan, as you know, is the co-founder and current executive director of U.S. Resiliency Council. And by far, he's probably one of the most knowledgeable individuals. He's a structural engineer, and he practiced engineering for 30 years or so. And but he's also a leader. He's also a good manager that can communicate the message that is so important to all of us. Evan and I, we co-authored this paper, and we're going to be doing a second phase of it in the near future. But we identified the vulnerabilities of what all businesses should pay attention to. One, when the earthquake happens and you're not prepared, ladies and gentlemen, you lose cash flow. You lose equipment inventory. You heard that many times here before. Loss of workforce. You lose your most valuable asset, your employees. They're not going to stick around for you to reposition your company in a year or two. It just won't happen. They have bills to pay. Liability for losses, we heard about that. And environmental concerns, the hazardous waste and so on. But what business can sustain all of these loss and liability is not conceivable. That's why FEMA is telling us that if we follow the status quo, 40% of our businesses will not survive after a major earthquake. Yet, this is preventable. Earthquakes are not preventable, but a disaster is preventable. I am really honored on behalf of Optimum Seismic to be part of this effort that intends to change the culture of our business community, to make earthquake resiliency part of our business planning process, not just an afterthought. This makes me personally, as the COO of this company, proud because we are making a difference in our community for generations to come with these efforts that are being publicly discussed here today. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Did you want to say something?
Hello, my name is Hector Barreto, and I want to thank the leaders behind me and the organizers that put this together. This was a very impactful day, a lot of great information. I'm wearing two hats today. One is I'm the chairman of the Latino Coalition. This is a nationwide group that represents Hispanic businesses based out of Washington, D.C. But I'm also a business owner that started my business here in Los Angeles in 1987. And it's been referenced already. There was a major earthquake in 1987, the Whittier earthquake. A lot of us still remember that and how difficult it was for some of us to recover from that. I was just starting my business. 7 years later, we had the Northridge earthquake. And so it was like a double whammy, so to speak. Not only have I been involved with business organizations and having my own business, but I also had the honor and the privilege to be the SBA administrator for the U.S. I left Los Angeles in 2001, moved to Washington, D.C., and took over the Small Business Administration. I'm very proud that I was able to serve 2 terms in Washington. Something that I didn't understand when I took over that position was that I knew that I was going to be helping small businesses with capital and training and getting contracts, but I didn't understand at the time the pivotal role that the Small Business Administration plays in terms of disasters. And for whatever reason, my tenure was bookended by the 2 largest disasters in U.S. history. One of them was 9/11 at the front end of my tenure, and the other one was Hurricane Katrina. By the way, before those 2 disasters, the biggest disaster in U.S. history that the government responded to was the Northridge earthquake. I learned a lot from my experience being back at SBA and working on disaster response around the country. But one of the pivotal lessons that I learned is that it's not a question of if something's going to happen in your business. It's really just a question of when something happens. And to the extent that you do some planning, that you educate yourself, that you inform yourself, your chances of surviving a disaster go up exponentially. I remember when we responded to small businesses in Manhattan, that those businesses that had done a little bit of planning could go back into business very quickly. Those businesses that never thought about doing it, they went away. And a lot of the experts behind me have already talked about what is the opportunity cost. 2 things that are critically important to me are the small business community and the Hispanic community. It's already been referenced that California by itself is probably the 7th largest economy in the world. And so if something happens in California, it doesn't just affect California, it affects the whole country and, for that matter, the whole world. If you look at the Hispanic community, just the purchasing power and what it represents in terms of small business formation, it would be the 8th largest economy in the world. And by the way, just a couple of facts that you probably already know. There are 4 million Hispanic businesses in the United States, and 1/3 of them live in California. 1/4 of them live in Southern California. Those businesses are small, medium, and large, and they generate $800 billion to the U.S. economy. And the best part is they're doubling every 5 years. We won't have 4 million companies in the next 10 years. We'll have 16 million. And by the way, women are starting businesses in our community 5 times faster than any other community. So it's incumbent upon us that we not only prepare, that's our responsibility, we must prepare, we must plan. It's not a question of if, it's just when. And so I want to thank the leadership behind me for putting this event together. I look forward to participating in future opportunities, and I will do everything that I can through my network. And by the way, information on SBA, sba.gov, a lot of great information, a lot of great tools. You're not in this by yourself. And if you're a Hispanic business and we can help you, we're thelatinocoalition.com. Thank you for your attention.
Told you it was awesome. That was great, Hector. Thank you so much for joining us. In fact, it's interesting when we talk about the power of the Hispanic business community. Stephen and I are having dinner tonight with the Mexico Consul General, talking about our work with Mexico and Southern California, as we're the biggest trading partners with one another. So that's very timely. But ultimately today, what we get to decide is what community we want to live in. Are we going to be one that stands or one that falls? And basically, I think we've learned, we can all agree, seismic resilient businesses are absolutely a key part of the answer of getting that one right. Thank you so much for coming today. All our guests are here for questions individually afterwards. Have a great day.